Hey guys, tonight we step softly into the flickering half-light of the 15th century, where parchment curls at the edges like old bread and the air smells of linseed oil, candle smoke, and ambition. You stand in a cramped studio, its ceiling too low for comfort, its shelves stacked with rolled maps that look like sleeping serpents. Outside, the narrow street hums with merchants and gossip, but inside, the world is being redrawn. Literally. Someone coughs, someone mutters about longitude, and a droplet of ink becomes a coastline. You probably won't survive this, at least not with your sense of direction intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I want to see how far across the map this little corner of the internet reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You watch a hand glide across the parchment, trembling only slightly. The quill is raven black, its feather glossy, its tip sharpened like a whisper. The man holding it is a mapmaker, though in this era he might call himself a cosmographer, a geographer, or even a philosopher. You'll learn that titles matter less than reputation, and reputation depends on who buys your maps. Kings, merchants, and explorers all crave them, not because they trust them, but because they want to. Every map is a promise, a half-true story pretending to be fact. The room's silence is broken by a soft rasp, ink meeting vellum. You can hear the thin scratch like a heartbeat. It's not paper yet, that's for the future. This is stretched calfskin, translucent in the lamplight, an expensive canvas that will soon hold an entire world, or at least a corner of one. The mapmaker murmurs to himself about coastlines of Africa, though he's never seen the sea. His knowledge comes from sailors' stories, letters smuggled from Lisbon, and half-burned scraps of earlier maps, treasures rescued from shipwrecks, or occasionally, stolen from rival studios. Historians still argue whether early Renaissance cartographers were more artists than scientists. Some say they were dreamers painting the unknown. Others claim they were proto-engineers, merging mathematics and faith. You, watching this craftsman lick his thumb to smudge a shadow of an island, might lean toward the first group. A cat meows in the corner. Reddish fur, belly round from stolen bread, a torn white shirt draped across its back as if it owns the place. It watches the ink dry like it's considering a career change. The mapmaker chuckles and tosses a crumb. You notice the cat's orange pajama bottoms are frayed, its dignity intact. Even in this age of royal patrons and church commissions, poverty has a certain charm if you squint. Outside, the bells toll midnight. Inside, a tiny globe turns on a wooden stand, its equator crudely etched. Europe sits proudly at the center, a sign not of geography, but of ego. Over in the corner, a dusty chart shows the Mediterranean like a cracked mirror. North is south, east is a rumor. That's the thing about these early maps. They lie beautifully. You lean closer and catch a glimpse of a tiny inscription, Terra Incognita, unknown land. Two words that mean both mystery and opportunity. Every blank patch is a challenge. Fill it first, claim it forever. A joke passes among mapmakers of the time. The more you don't know, the more famous you can become. You can imagine the quiet laughter over wine-stained tables. The man sighs. He's heard whispers of a Portuguese sailor who claims to have found a new island, one shaped like a dragon's tooth. Another cartographer, his rival across the street, has already drawn it, naming it after himself. The first man grimaces but adds it anyway. Accuracy isn't the point. Authority is. And here lies the first true rivalry of the Renaissance mapmakers. Truth versus fame. You feel the tension in the air like static before a storm. The guilds that once guarded painting and sculpture now glance suspiciously at these parchment alchemists who mix geometry and gossip. The candles flicker again, reflecting in a polished brass compass. You trace the faint lines connecting Europe to Asia, Asia to Africa, a spider web of trade routes still half imagined. Somewhere a monk in a monastery is illuminating a mappa mundi with halos and sea monsters. Somewhere else, a Venetian is painting the same world, only with more gold and fewer saints. The mainstream historical fact here? By the early 1400s, European cartography had already begun to shed its medieval roots. The Catalan Atlas, created around 1375, was a turning point. A map that combined geography with stories of kings and camels, faith and rumor. It was, in essence, the Renaissance before the Renaissance, drawn in ink and imagination. But here's the quirky tidbit. Some of these early maps included literal recipes. Along the coast of Africa, one chart scribbled a note about how to preserve fish using vinegar and sea salt. In another, the mapmaker doodled a turtle wearing a crown. No one knows why, though scholars suspect boredom. Historians still argue whether these marginalia were personal jokes, coded messages, or simply distractions from the monotony of compass lines. You can almost smell the salt on those imaginary seas. The cat yarns unimpressed and curls near a pile of rolled vellum. You envy its peace. The mapmaker does not. He dips his quill again, outlining the edge of the known world. Every stroke is a declaration of control over chaos, over ignorance, over nature itself. A breeze sneaks in through the window, rustling a stack of papers. On top lies a half-finished chart titled Mare Tenebros, the Sea of Darkness. Sailors fear it, poets praise it, and cartographers profit from it. The unknown, after all, sells better than the familiar. You can imagine what it must feel like to draw continents you'll never see, to name islands that may not exist, to hear sailors return home just to tell you your map was wrong. You'd laugh, maybe pour another drink, and start again. The world changes faster than ink can dry. The mapmaker finally leans back, stretches, and peers at his creation. It's not finished, no map ever is, but it's enough to boast about. He'll carry it to a patron tomorrow, maybe a banker or a duke, and trade it for a handful of coins and a crumb of prestige. He doesn't know that a century later, his work will be obsolete, his coastlines mocked by more precise men with sharper compasses. But for now, he's a master of the world, or at least of the illusion of it. The reddish cat blinks, unimpressed, and flicks its tail across the edge of the parchment, smearing a bit of ink. The man groans, wipes it away, and in that smudge you can almost see the shape of the future, because that's what the Renaissance is, one long smudge becoming a masterpiece. And as the candle gutters, casting dancing shadows across oceans yet unnamed, you realize this is where it all begins, not on the decks of ships, but in these small, ink-stained rooms. The gentle rivalry of Renaissance mapmakers starts not with conquest, but with curiosity, the most dangerous kind of ambition there is.
The morning smells of sea salt and secrets. You step out from the narrow cobblestone street of that first workshop and into Lisbon's waking hum, a chorus of gulls, sailors, and vendors hawking oranges the size of clenched fists. The air is thick with possibility. You follow it toward the docks, where ships sway like nervous debutantes and flags flutter with the vanity of nations. Here, in Portugal, maps aren't art, they're strategy. And every line drawn or erased could shift the weights of the world. A cartographer named Pedro leans over his table, his brow furrowed like a coastline itself. He's one of the king's cosmographers, men sworn to secrecy, their quills guarded by royal decree. The Portuguese crown doesn't share. What you see before you, the Pardo Real, or royal pattern, isn't just a map, it's classified information, the 16th century equivalent of nuclear codes. You breathe softly, almost afraid that exhaling too loudly might earn you a place in a dungeon. Pedro dips his quill into a pot of iron gall ink, dark as the Atlantic. You can smell its metallic tang. He traces the African coast with a trembling hand, marking harbors known only to Portuguese ships. Each dot, each tiny circle means power, gold, pepper, ivory, and sometimes human lives. The spice trade is the bloodstream of empire, and the cartographers are its secret physicians. The mainstream historical fact? Portugal's success in the Age of Discovery wasn't an accident. Under Prince Henry the Navigator, the School of Surge became a magnet for mathematicians, astronomers, and mapmakers. They didn't just guess, they measured, using astrolabes and quadrants, to turn the ocean from chaos into chart. It's said that Henry's library of sea charts was the envy of all Europe, though no one outside his court ever saw it. You notice something odd about Pedro's map. It's backwards. Not to the untrained eye, but the subtle shift in coastlines, the deliberate distortion of scale. It's meant to mislead. Should a foreign agent steal this parchment, he'd find himself shipwrecked before Madeira. You smile at the cleverness of it, though the reddish cat on the sill just yawns and licks its paw, unimpressed by human paranoia. Historians still argue whether these royal maps truly existed as vast master charts, or whether they're more myth than reality, stories whispered to justify Portugal's supremacy. What's certain, though, is that secrecy became part of the nation's identity. To draw a map was to commit treason against ignorance. To reveal it was to betray your country. The rivalry here is less gentle. Across the sea, Spanish agents try to infiltrate Lisbon's workshops, bribing apprentices and dock workers for even a glance at those guarded scrolls. One story, half legend, tells of a young copyist who was caught slipping out with a miniature map sewn into his doublet. They say he vanished. No trial, no record, just gone. A lesson to others who might confuse curiosity with espionage. Pedro mutters to himself as he draws a faint circle near the Cape Verde Islands. He says, "We'll reach India. Just not yet." His hand steadies with pride. The reddish cat stretches, climbs onto the table, and sits precisely on top of Africa. Pedro sighs, but doesn't move it. Perhaps the cat is right. No one truly owns the world after all. A clerk enters, handing over a sealed parchment. The royal seal glints red in the sunlight. Inside is a new report from Bartholomew Diaz. He's rounded the Cape of Good Hope. The news spreads like wildfire through the cartographer's quarters. You can almost feel it ripple through the air. Awe, jealousy, fear. Every discovery means rewriting everything you've already drawn. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Portuguese maps included deliberately false islands, phantom lands meant to fool competitors. One of them, the island of St. Brendan, was drawn so convincingly that sailors swore they saw it for centuries afterwards. There were even expeditions sent to find it, chasing mirages inked by men like Pedro. A quiet prank turned into generations of nautical delusion. Pedro's apprentice, a wiry boy named Duarte, watches with wide eyes. He's the one who actually copies the maps by hand at night when the master's eyes grow too heavy to focus. He dreams of adventure, of standing on the deck of a caravel not hunched over a desk. But the truth? The desk is where the real voyages happen, where imagination sails faster than any ship. You step outside, blinking against the harsh Atlantic light. The docks are alive with movement, coils of rope, sacks of pepper, sailors shouting in 10 languages. And everywhere, whispers. Whispers about new coasts, new winds, new profits. In the taverns, you hear laughter. The Spanish say they've found a western route, a man scoffs. They'll fall off the edge before supper. You chuckle, though a quiet doubt lingers in the air. In a shadowed corner, 2 foreign traders exchange coins for what looks like a rolled parchment. You can guess what it is. A stolen chart, worth more than gold. One glance at a secret route could save a ship months of wandering or doom a rival fleet. The rivalry between mapmakers isn't just academic anymore. It's geopolitical. You can almost taste the tension like salt water and iron. Pedro returns to his bench and opens a fresh piece of vellum. He says, "We'll need to show India here, and maybe Japan above it." He's not sure. No one is. The world still bends and folds like paper, and rumor fills its gaps better than knowledge. The reddish cat hops onto his lap, its fur catching the glow of the afternoon sun. For a moment, everything softens. The paranoia, the politics, the hunger for control. Just a man, a map, and a creature that cares nothing for longitude. You think about how, even centuries later, humans will still argue over borders that began as lines like these, drawn by hands trembling, not from morality, but from excitement. As night falls, the lamps along the harbor flicker on. Ships rock gently, their sails furled like sleeping wings. Pedro wraps his maps in oilcloth and locks them away in a chest bound with iron. The key hangs from his neck. You hear him whisper, "Tomorrow, maybe, we draw the east." You can't help but grin because you already know what's coming. The Spanish will make their own bold move soon, and Portugal's secretive pride will face an unthinkable challenge. The idea that someone else might reach the Indies first by sailing west. But that, of course, is a story for later. For now, you stand on the pier as dawn brushes gold over the horizon. The reddish cat sits beside you, tail flicking thoughtfully, as if marking invisible meridians in the air. The ocean stretches ahead like an unfinished map, waiting for someone foolish enough, or brave enough, to redraw it.
Venice doesn't sleep, it shimmers. You arrive under a milky dawn where canals breathe mist and gondolas glide like ghosts, their oars slicing ripples of molten silver. The air tastes faintly of salt and candle wax. Bells echo from hidden towers, and the reddish cat trots along the damp stone beside you, tail high, fur puffed against the lagoon breeze. Here, in this floating labyrinth of art and commerce, the world's beauty is bought and sold, and its maps are no exception. You follow the scent of paint and parchment to a workshop tucked behind the Rialto. Inside, chaos reigns with elegance. Pigments are ground to powder in tiny bowls, gold leaf lies scattered like breadcrumbs, and a young apprentice hums off-key as he scrapes a sheet of vellum smooth with pumice. This is not the sterile geometry of Lisbon. This is theater. Every map here is a painting pretending to be science. A man with silvered hair and an embroidered vest, the master, you presume, leans over a vast chart of the Mediterranean. His name is Girolamo, and he works with the conviction of a poet who's been told the universe rhymes in Latin. He dips his brush, not quill, into a pot of crushed lapis lazuli and spreads a thin sky across the Aegean. His maps are dazzling, the sort that patrons display at banquets just to prove they can afford imagination. The mainstream historical fact: Venice during the 15th and 16th centuries was Europe's printing capital. While Portugal hoarded secrets, Venice exported them, sometimes without permission. The city's cartographers like Fra Mauro and later Benedetto Bordone were among the first to merge geographic accuracy with visual storytelling. Fra Mauro's world map from around 1450 placed south at the top, a quiet act of rebellion that still puzzles scholars. Girolamo hums as he paints sea monsters with loving detail. One has the body of a fish, the teeth of envy, and the eyes of boredom. "It keeps sailors humble," he says, noticing your gaze. The reddish cat jumps on the table, pawing at a compass rose still drying in vermilion. Girolamo just laughs. "Every good map needs a bit of chaos," he adds. You suspect the cat agrees. Historians still argue whether Venetian mapmakers, with their artistic flourishes and poetic license, helped or hindered geographic progress. Some claim they misled generations with their decorative deceit. Others insist that without them, maps would never have become objects of desire, capable of seducing patrons and explorers alike. You lean toward the latter. After all, who would chase a dull coastline when you could pursue one gilded with myth?
The reddish cat wakes, stretches luxuriously, and hops onto the new chart. Its paw lands squarely on India. Girolamo gasps, then chuckles. Well, perhaps that's fate. He dabs a dot of gold where the paw print smudged. A blessing from our feline navigator. The cat blinks, unimpressed, as though aware it's just been immortalized. By evening, the lagoon outside turns molten orange. Gondoliers sing mournful tunes that echo off marble facades. Girolamo sits by the window, holding his finished map in the fading light. "Do you think they'll believe it?" he asks softly. You hesitate, about which part you're not sure. The monsters, the proportions, or the idea that any map could capture truth. He doesn't wait for an answer. "They always do," he says, smiling wistfully. "At least until the next one." And there it is, the quiet heartbeat of every rivalry in this age. Not hatred, not greed, but the fear of being replaced by a better lie. You can feel it like a current under the calm surface of the canals. For every Girolamo in Venice, there's a Pedro in Lisbon and a soon-to-be Martin in Seville, each convinced his ink is pure, his lines truer. As the last candle gutters out, the reddish cat hops onto the window ledge, watching lanterns flicker across the water like drifting stars. You follow its gaze, realizing that maps, these fragile dreams on parchment, are really mirrors. Each one shows the world as someone wants it to be. The night sighs through Venice's alleys, and you hear the faint splash of an oar. The city hums, conspiratorial and eternal, as Girolamo whispers to himself, "Tomorrow, perhaps, I'll redraw paradise."
The air grows heavier as you cross westward, where the Mediterranean's calm gives way to the vast, breathless power of empire. You arrive in Seville, Spain, a city that smells of orange blossoms and ambition, a place where gold dust from the New World settles invisibly on every sill. The reddish cat pads ahead of you through the market square, slipping between barrels of spices and sailors' boots as if it owns the place. You can hear the river whispering nearby, swollen with ships returning from journeys half mythical and wholly dangerous. Here, maps are no longer private art or princely indulgence. They are instruments of domination. Spain's mapmakers work for conquest itself. You push open the door to a grand stone building where cartographers sit hunched over tables under the royal seal of Castile. Quills scratch like swords, and every parchment feels heavier than it should, as though burdened by the weight of continents. The mainstream historical fact: after Columbus's voyages, Spain established the Casa de la Contracción in 1503, the House of Trade. It functioned as a mixture of naval academy, archive, and intelligence agency. Every chart, every course, every coastline discovered by Spanish explorers was copied and guarded here. No one could print a map of the New World without royal permission. You can almost feel the paranoia baked into the air like humidity. At one table, a man named Martin, an older cartographer with inkstand cuffs and a temperament like vinegar, carefully adjusts the Tropic of Cancer on a map of the Caribbean. He doesn't trust anyone, least of all the sailors who bring him reports. "They see what they want to see," he mutters, "then call it discovery." His apprentice nods obediently, though you can tell he's already planning to steal a copy. You peer over Martin's shoulder. His map shows the Americas like a broken promise, beautiful, sprawling, and entirely wrong. Florida bulges like a swollen toe. South America tapers into a delicate tail. The ocean is still called Mare Oceanum, the Sea of Mystery. He knows it's inaccurate, but it's politically useful. To the Crown, geography is just an argument drawn in ink. Historians still argue whether the Casa de la Contracción actually maintained a master chart of the entire known world, the Padrón Real, similar to Portugal's. Some records say it was updated with every expedition. Others claim it was too chaotic to be consistent. What's certain is that Spain's maps were propaganda disguised as precision. The reddish cat hops onto a crate, yawning. Its orange pajama bottoms are speckled with sawdust, and it eyes a basket of fish with the quiet authority of a king. Martin glares. "Shoot!" he grumbles, waving a compass divider. The cat simply stares back, unimpressed. You try not to laugh. A courier bursts in, breathless, clutching a sealed dispatch. "News from the Indies!" he shouts. Martin seizes the parchment, breaks the wax and scans it. His jaw tightens. "More islands," he murmurs. "Always more islands." He sketches a chain of tiny dots off the coast of what must be Central America. "Each one a reason for war," he says. Here's the quirky tidbit. Spanish mapmakers often named new lands after saints whose feast days matched the date of discovery. That's how you got San Salvador, Trinidad, and Santa Cruz. But when one expedition found nothing but sand and mosquitoes, the frustrated navigator named the place Isla de Mal Dia, Island of Bad Day. The name didn't stick, but the sentiment endured. The reddish cat climbs onto Martin's lap despite his protests. It curls up, purring like a tiny ship's engine. He sighs, resigning himself to fate. "At least one creature in this empire obeys no orders," he mutters. You glance toward another table, where a young scholar is arguing with a priest. Their voices rise, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "The New World cannot exist," the priest insists. "Scripture speaks of 3 continents only: Asia, Africa, and Europe. A fourth is heresy." The scholar jabs at a map with his quill. "Then tell that to the parrots, Father. They didn't read your Bible before they started flying in from across the sea." Historians still argue whether the Church truly viewed the discovery of the Americas. Some clergy saw it as proof of divine grandeur, God's endless creation. Others feared it contradicted Genesis itself. You can almost see the tension in this room. Faith stretched across an expanding horizon, the universe literally growing faster than theology could patch it. Outside, the sun strikes the river, turning it to fire. Sailors unload chests of cacao, silver, and indigo, treasures that rewrite geography with every arrival. In the taverns, you overhear captains boasting of islands shaped like skulls or mountains made of emerald. The stories twist faster than maps can keep up. Martin rolls his shoulders, wincing. "Too many new names," he grumbles. "Too much sea." He points at his apprentice. "You know what's worse than an empty ocean? A full one." You think he's joking, but the exhaustion in his eyes says otherwise. The reddish cat leaps from his lap to the windowsill, gazing out at the harbor. The sails of returning ships rise like ghostly wings. Martin follows its gaze, his voice softening. "Every time they return, the world gets larger and I get smaller." He isn't wrong. Each discovery renders his previous work obsolete. Every explorer's boast sends ripples through these quiet rooms, erasing months of careful ink work. It's a cycle that drives some men to drink, others to greatness. You can feel it growing at him, the desire to draw the perfect world, the final version. But there is no final version. A new apprentice enters, carrying a rolled parchment wrapped in blue silk. "From Magellan's voyage," he whispers. The room stills. Martin unfolds it slowly, reverently. The strait at the tip of South America glimmers in the candlelight. "So he did it," Martin breathes. "He proved it." For a moment, silence fills the air like a prayer. The world is round, connected, finite. And yet, paradoxically, infinite again. He starts redrawing immediately, lines crossing lines like veins of discovery. "We'll need new legends," he says, half to himself. "The old ones won't fit anymore." You linger near the doorway as night creeps in, shadows stretching long across the floor. The reddish cat rubs against your leg, purring softly, as if approving the moment. The map glows faintly under the flicker of oil lamps, oceans deep blue, lands raw and uncertain. The priest has gone silent, his faith momentarily stunned by evidence inked on calfskin. The young scholar smirks, but says nothing. Martine keeps drawing, each stroke steadier than the last, like a heartbeat regaining rhythm. You realize that this is the heart of the Renaissance rivalry. Each nation believes its ink defines reality. Each cartographer draws not to record truth, but to declare it. And in that declaration, borders form, empires rise, and centuries later, wars will be justified by the same shaky lines born in these candlelit rooms. Outside, Seville's night is alive with music, laughter, and the rustle of palm leaves in the breeze. You step out into the glow of lanterns along the quay. The reddish cat follows, pausing to look back at the building one last time. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a ship cuts through the dark, carrying another rumor, another discovery, another reason for men like Martine to redraw the world once more. You exhale, watching your breath merge with the mist above the river. The cat meows softly, as if to remind you, maps may change, but curiosity never does.
Paris hums like a thought half-spoken, restless and perfumed with ink and ambition. You arrive as rain mists the cobblestones, each droplet rippling across the Seine like a sigh. The reddish cat follows close behind, tail flicking in rhythm with the clatter of carriage wheels. It's the 16th century now, and the French are finally realizing they're late to the cartographic feast. The Iberians have their seas, the Italians their art. But France, oh France, intends to have style and certainty. You duck beneath an awning near the Rue Saint-Jacques, where the city's printing shops crowd together like gossipers. Inside one, the smell of fresh ink hits you first, sharp, metallic, alive. Sheets of maps hang from lines overhead, drying like laundry. Each one glows faintly in candlelight, rivers winding like calligraphy, mountains rendered in soft, arrogant strokes. Paris isn't just catching up, it's performing. At a long table sits Guillaume, one of the king's favored engravers. His hair sticks up from long hours bent over copper plates, and his fingertips gleam faintly where acid has bitten them. Every line, he mutters, is an argument. He's not wrong. Here, geography is political theater. Whoever controls the image of the world controls how the world imagines itself. The mainstream historical fact: during the 16th century, France began establishing royal printing privileges for mapmakers, licenses that granted exclusive rights to publish certain charts. It was part protection, part censorship. If you drew the world incorrectly, or too correctly, you risked prison. Guillaume has that weary look of someone who's seen both sides of the rule. You lean closer as he etches a fine coastline into the copper. The reddish cat hops onto the bench beside him, watching the slow magic unfold. "See here," Guillaume whispers, tracing the edge of a peninsula. "We widen it slightly, makes France look braver." You raise an eyebrow. He grins. Cartographic optimism. Historians still argue whether French mapmaking under Francis I and his successors was genuinely scientific or merely decorative nationalism. The truth, like most coastlines on early charts, is a little wavy. Francis scholars founded the first Dépôt de la Marine to train navigators, yet many of their maps featured cherubs holding compasses and Neptune flexing near Brittany. Science with flair. That's the Parisian signature. A young visitor enters, dripping from the rain. She's a noblewoman, her cloak embroidered with fleur-de-lis, her expression sharp as a dagger. "Monsieur Guillaume," she says, "my father requires an updated world map, something impressive. He's hosting a dinner." Guillaume bows slightly. "Accuracy or admiration, madame?" She smirks. "Admiration, of course. Accuracy is for the poor." You almost choke on a laugh. The reddish cat snorts in agreement. As Guillaume prepares a fresh copper plate, you notice sketches pinned along the wall, mock-ups of continents, coastlines shaded in delicate crosshatch. One of them depicts the Americas, labeled simply Nouvelle France, stretching implausibly from Florida to the Arctic. Guillaume shrugs when you point it out. Someday, maybe, he says. Ambition is a form of truth. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some French mapmakers inserted secret signatures hidden in the decorative flourishes around their cartouches, the ornate title boxes on maps. A tiny G curled into a vine, a minuscule cat drawn inside a compass rose. These marks were their way of whispering, "I was here," even when the crown took all the credit. Guillaume, you notice, etches a subtle paw print beneath a cherub's wing. You don't have to ask why. The door bursts open again, this time with a gust of laughter and cigar smoke. A pair of gentlemen in velvet coats enter, explorers just back from court, or perhaps storytellers pretending to be. "We've seen the Western Sea," one declares, "a passage straight through the continent." Guillaume's eyes narrow. "And did you sail through it, monsieur?" "Not quite," the man admits, "but a native described it vividly." Guillaume sighs. Ah, the most reliable cartographer of all, the enthusiastic stranger. Historians still argue whether French map-making under Francis I and his successors was naive hope or deliberate propaganda. Many French maps from this era showed a non-existent Mer d'Ouest, a western sea cutting across North America. It took 2 centuries for explorers to prove it didn't exist, but by then the fiction had already inspired expeditions, investors, and even poetry. Sometimes the map creates the world, not the other way around. Outside, the rain deepens. You and the reddish cat watch rivulets snake down the window pane, mirroring the rivers on Guillaume's newest chart. "Every drop finds the sea," he murmurs, "and every map finds its owner." He glances at you, smiling faintly, even bad ones. In the back room, printers crank the great press, its rhythm steady as a heartbeat. Fresh sheets roll out, pressed with blackened geography. A boy carries them to hang near the ceiling, where they sway like ghost sails. The air hums with potential. Guillaume lights a candle and examines his finished plate. "Beautiful, no?" he asks softly. You nod. "But it's wrong." "Of course," he says, laughing. "All good art is." You follow him as he carries the map to his client, the noblewoman waiting by the door. She unfurls it, smiles, and claps her hands. Magnificent! France looks so expansive. Guillaume bows. "That's because she dreams large, madame." The payment, a purse of silver, changes hands discreetly. As she leaves, he whispers to you. She'll hang it in her salon. Guests will nod, sip their wine, and feel patriotic. That's the true North we serve. The reddish cat leaps onto the table, pawing at a stray scrap of parchment. Guillaume tears it into a small square, sprinkles a few crumbs on it, and smiles. "My best critic," he says. "He eats my mistakes." The cat purrs, eyes half closed, clearly enjoying its new role in French enlightenment. As dusk gathers, the shop quiets. The last apprentices clean the ink rollers, stack the plates, and douse the candles. Guillaume sits alone, watching the final embers fade. "Do you think they'll ever agree?" he asks suddenly. "The mapmakers, I mean. Portugal, Spain, Italy, France. Will they ever draw the same world?" You shake your head. "If they did, they'd be out of work." He chuckles softly. "Then may we never agree." Outside, the Seine glimmers beneath a rising moon. You stroll along its banks, the reddish cat padding beside you, the city's lights reflecting like scattered stars. Somewhere, a poet recites verses about love and loss. Somewhere else, an astronomer peers through a lens, charting the sky as others chart the earth. It's all the same hunger, to understand, to claim, to make meaning. As you pause on a bridge, You realize how far you've come, from the whispered studios of Portugal to this glittering capital of ink and irony. Each city, each mapmaker has redrawn not just the planet, but the idea of what truth looks like. And tonight, under the pale French moon, you can almost hear the world itself turning in its sleep, reshaping its edges just a little more. The reddish cat yawns, curls up on the bridge's cold stone, and blinks at you as if to say, "Go on, there's more yet to draw."
You wake to the creak of rigging and the smell of salt, not the wild Atlantic, but a canal's quiet brine. The air tastes northern now, crisp and efficient. You've reached Antwerp, where merchants count silver faster than priests count sins. Beside you, the reddish cat stretches inside its frayed t-shirt, eyes half-lidded, unimpressed by the cold drizzle. It's time for the cartographic rivalry to move north, where ink meets mathematics and passion dresses itself as precision. The workshop you enter looks less like an artist's den and more like a laboratory. Compass arms glitter under morning light. Rulers lean like soldiers beside globes half-painted in ochre and blue. Here, you realize, no one guesses, they calculate. A tall, thin man named Abraham Ortelius hunches over a large table. You watch him arrange sheets as carefully as a jeweler setting stones. His voice is soft, Flemish-laced, full of patience that borders on obsession. Every coastline, he says, should behave like geometry, even when it refuses. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Ortelius published the Theatrum Orbis Terrarum in 1570, the first modern atlas, a collected gallery of world maps unified by consistent style and projection. Before that, maps were independent performers, each with its own ego. Ortelius stitched them into harmony, though not without borrowing freely from others. Historians still argue whether his borrowing was scholarly collaboration or intellectual theft. Some call him a unifier, others a polite pirate in a lace collar. You lean closer and notice faint initials in the margins, scribbled credits to forgotten geographers, some real, some maybe decorative apologies. The reddish cat flicks its tail approvingly, as if sensing the art of quiet plagiarism. Ortelius gestures to a stack of letters on his desk. Requests, he sighs. Spain demands their borders redrawn. The English wish to appear larger. Venice wants less sea, more dignity. He glances at you. Do you see? The world itself negotiates. His apprentice enters, carrying a roll of parchment wrapped in oilskin. From Mercator, he says. Ah, there's that name, the rival star in the northern sky. Gerardus Mercator, mathematician, projection wizard, an eternal thorn in Ortelius's tidy conscience. You unroll the parchment carefully. It's a map of the world, but stretched, distorted, the poles flaring like melted glass. He's done it again, Ortelius mutters, turning the globe into a scroll. And here's the quirky tidbit. Mercator's famous projection, which makes Greenland look like a pumped-up steroid version of itself, wasn't designed to deceive. It was meant to help sailors. Straight lines on his map corresponded to constant compass bearings at sea. But, as often happens, convenience became truth. To this day, classrooms still teach that stretched illusion. The reddish cat, gazing at the distorted Arctic, looks mildly offended on behalf of physics. Historians still argue whether Mercator and Ortelius were true friends or courteous adversaries. Letters between them survive, warm, flattering, but tinged with rivalry. It's as if they both knew that every compliment was also a challenge. You imagine them at a tavern, mugs clinking, each pretending to admire the other's work while mentally redrawing the mistakes. In Antwerp's harbor, ships groan under the weight of spice, silk, and rumor. Sailors stomp up the gangplanks with news of coastlines never seen before. A new island off Java, one insists, shaped like a dragon's jaw. Ortelius listens politely, jotting notes. How big? He asks. Bigger than France, the sailor says proudly.
Ortelius smiles thinly. Then perhaps smaller than you remember. That's how it goes up here. The Dutch and Flemish map-makers are accountants of imagination. They weigh stories in grains of salt, literally. Yet for all their accuracy, there's poetry in their ink. The shading of the seas looks like clouds dreaming underwater. The calligraphy dances like polite gossip. You wander deeper into the city's printing district, where rival presses hum day and night. The reddish cat pads ahead, sniffing at inkpots, earning mild scowls from apprentices. One boy shows you a half-finished globe, perfectly smooth, except for a missing slice where the Pacific should be. We ran out of certainty, he jokes. In a nearby shop, a woman engraver works silently, her face half-shadowed. She's carving sea monsters into the margins of a Dutch chart, each creature rendered with meticulous tenderness. Do they scare sailors, you ask? She smirks. Not the real ones, only the men who stay home. The rain resumes, tapping against leaded glass as if to keep time with her Buren strokes. The reddish cat hops onto the counter, tail curling like a question mark. The woman doesn't shoo it away. A northern muse, she says softly. Later, at Ortelius's home, candeleb flickers across a great wooden cabinet, the map theater, he calls it. Inside are dozens of maps, each mounted like a painting. He opens one drawer after another, murmuring as if to himself. Africa from Portuguese charts, Asia from Venetian hearsay, America from Spanish exaggerations, Europe, our favorite illusion. You realize as he speaks that this northern cartography isn't fueled by empire or vanity, but by order, the desperate human wish to file infinity into neat rectangles. And yet, precision breeds its own madness. Some nights, Ortelius compares coastlines and swears he sees them drifting apart. Look here, he says one evening, eyes wide. South America and Africa, they fit, do they not? You nod. He whispers, perhaps the earth once cracked like old leather? It's a throwaway thought to him, but centuries later, geologists will echo that same idea as continental drift. The reddish cat glances at the map, unimpressed by humanity's slow revelations. Historians still argue whether Ortelius's hunch about the continents came from careful study or just an idle visual rhyme. Either way, it marks a rare spark, the moment when cartography becomes prophecy. Night falls, and the canals mirror the stars. Lanterns flicker on the water, making it seem like the city is floating upside down. You and the cat sit by the window, watching reflections ripple with each passing boat. What happens, you wonder aloud, when every map agrees? From the dark, Ortelius answers softly, then we'll start inventing new worlds to disagree about. The reddish cat stretches, curls into a cinnamon-colored puddle on your lap, and begins to purr. Its rhythm steady as the press is thudding in the distance. In Antwerp, accuracy hums like lullaby machinery, and rivalry sounds suspiciously like friendship. You close your eyes for a moment, lulled by the scent of ink and candle wax, imagining the next city already waiting to redraw the world once more.
Fog presses low over the Thames, thick enough to taste. It smells of fish, soot, and a faintly sour arrogance, the signature perfume of an empire still trying to believe in itself. You and the reddish cat trudge along the muddy docks, its torn shirt damp from the mist. Somewhere a bell tolls noon, though the light never changes. You've arrived in London, late to the Renaissance cartographic game but eager to rewrite the rules anyway. Around you, men in rough coats haul crates stamped East India Company, while clerks in powdered wigs scurry with ledgers. The English, you realize, don't make maps to decorate parlors or please kings. They make them to invoice the world. Inside a dim riverside warehouse, a cluster of mapmakers huddle over a draft so enormous it could serve as a dinner tablecloth. Ink stains every sleeve. Their leader, a wiry man with fox-colored hair, introduces himself as John Speed. Historian, geographer, dreamer, he says, as if listing sins. Here's your mainstream historical fact. John Speed's The Theatre of the Empire of Great Brittany, published in 1611, was one of the first comprehensive atlases of England and Wales, merging political detail with vivid artistry. Each county came alive with coats of arms, portraits of monarchs, even scenes of local life. Speed squints at his masterpiece, tapping the map with his quill. "Somerset's border is wrong again," he mutters, "and Cornwall refuses to stay attached." He looks up at you, eyes bright with exhaustion. "Do you know how many versions of England I've drawn this week?" You guess 3? 7, he sighs, "and they're all wrong in different ways." Historians still argue whether Speed was truly a geographer or more of a compiler, a talented collagist who refined others' data into something greater. Either way, he understood what many didn't, that maps were mirrors of imagination first, measurement second. The reddish cat leaps onto a nearby stool, batting at a roll of vellum. One apprentice laughs nervously. "Careful, sir, the ink's dear." The cat flicks its ear, unimpressed by capitalism. Speed gestures for him to follow him into another room where the walls are plastered with half-finished maps of the world. Some are beautifully detailed, others look like abstract art. "You see," he explains, "the Portuguese hoard their roots, the Dutch guard their secrets, and the Spanish exaggerate their glory. We English," he smiles faintly, "make do with rumor and rain." Indeed, rumor is England's greatest export at this stage. Sailors return from the Indies with wild tales of islands that move, of lands made of ice, of oceans so vast that compasses spin in despair. You overhear one ship's captain claiming he's found the fabled Northwest Passage, though his eyes twitch when he says it. Here's the quirky tidbit. Early English maps sometimes included sea unicorns, narwhals, labeled as horned fish, often mistaken for proof of divine monsters. One even sold for the price of a small house, touted as the tusk of Leviathan. The reddish cat gazes skeptically at an engraved unicorn leaping through the Arctic waters on Speed's latest draft. You can almost hear it thinking, humans really will draw anything for attention. Historians still argue whether these embellished maps were intentional propaganda or just entrepreneurial optimism. After all, investors needed excitement. Nothing opens a purse faster than the promise of mythical resources. You trail Speed through the city's narrow lanes. Past the press of Fleet Street, he stops at a tavern where men drink ale from pewter mugs and argue about longitude as if it were a football score. A grizzled sailor named Hawkins swears he circumnavigated the globe. Another insists the Earth ends somewhere west of the Azores. "Gentlemen," Speed says dryly, "the world doesn't end, it merely gets expensive." They laugh, but there's tension in the air. The English have ambition, but lack access. The Dutch dominate trade, the Portuguese own the roots, and the Spanish hold the gold. So England sketches, dreams, spies, and waits. A boy bursts into the tavern with a bundle of damp papers. "News from the Indies!" he cries. Speed snatches a page, scanning quickly. His lips move silently. Bengal, Java, Sumatra. He looks up at you, eyes gleaming. "If we cannot have the world, we shall at least draw it before the others can." The reddish cat curls beneath the table, tail flicking like a metronome to the clinking of mugs. The air grows thick with smoke and half-truths. You follow Speed back to his workshop at dusk. The light slants gold through dusty windows, illuminating motes that drift like unanchored continents. On his desk, a globe spins lazily. "See here," he points, to the blank spaces. "Terra incognita," the polite way to say, "We have no idea." He smiles wearily. "But blankness sells hope, and hope funds ships."
He dips his quill and begins to shade the edge of an uncharted coast. "Do you ever think," he murmurs, "that someday, when everything's mapped, there'll be nothing left worth exploring?" You tilt your head. "They'll just start mapping each other." He laughs softly, a sound like paper tearing. "Then we'll never run out of work." Outside, fog wraps the river like linen. You can hear the presses from across the city, steady, methodical, unstoppable. London may be late to the game, but it's catching up fast. Within a few generations, its maps will redraw empires, dictate borders, and rename oceans. For now, it's ink and guessing, dreams in monochrome. The reddish cat paws at a scrap on the table, a half-inked outline of the Americas. Its paw leaves a smudge that almost resembles Newfoundland. "Perfect," he murmurs. "Authenticity by accident." As night settles, a knock sounds at the door. A cloaked visitor enters, face hidden, voice low. "From the Admiralty," he says, handing over a sealed packet. Speed breaks the wax, eyes scanning the contents. "Coordinates," he whispers, "real ones." He looks at you, half grinning, half terrified. "At last, we'll know where we've been lying." But even now you sense the paradox. In this city of fog and ambition, truth is just another trade good. The reddish cat yawns, unimpressed by revelation, and curls beside the fire. Somewhere beyond the mist, the tide turns. Ships slide silently into the current, carrying maps that are half fact, half faith. And as London drifts into sleep, the ink of empire begins to dry, ready for its next bold mistake.
You wake to the scratch of metal on metal, the sound of a burin biting into copper. It's sharper than a whisper, but softer than truth. You're in a cramped attic now, somewhere between Antwerp's precision and London's fog, a halfway house for secrets. The reddish cat curls beside a pile of discarded parchment, its tail flicking as though keeping count of lies. The mapmakers here don't sign their names on the door. Their work smells of vinegar and risk. You watch one man heat a plate over a candle flame, his breath steady, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. "You shouldn't be here," he says, without looking up. "But since you are, make yourself useful. Don't breathe too loud." This is the underworld of Renaissance cartography. The copyists, the forgers, the engravers who steal each other's coastlines like pickpockets. Here's your mainstream historical fact. By the late 1500s, map piracy had become a thriving underground industry. Dutch and English publishers routinely copied, re-engraved, or even mirrored the work of rivals. Some maps were so perfectly forged that historians today can't always tell who drew the original. You glance at the table where two nearly identical charts lie side by side. "Which is real?" you ask. The man smirks. "Whichever sells first." Historians still argue whether this cartographic plagiarism destroyed innovation or fueled it. After all, competition meant constant revision. Every theft invited an improvement. In that sense, the world wasn't just being discovered, it was being redesigned. The reddish cat hops onto the table, pawing the edge of a copper plate. The man flinches. "Careful! That's worth more than your fur." The cat looks unconcerned. You suspect it understands ownership better than most humans here. It owns only what it can nap on. You move to another bench where a woman works quietly, tracing coastlines backward using a thin sheet of wax. "It's safer reversed," she says. "They'll think it's new." Her candlelight flickers across the map, a mirrored Mediterranean, Italy pointing east like a question mark. "Isn't it wrong?" you ask. She smiles faintly. "Wrong is what gets printed." Here's the quirky tidbit. To protect their maps, some engravers embedded deliberate trap errors, a fake island, a misspelled harbor, a bent river. If those details appeared elsewhere, the theft was proven. Centuries later, modern cartographers still use similar tricks with digital maps.
Even plagiarism evolves. In the corner, two apprentices argue over how to copy a compass rose without revealing the theft. "Make it lean left," one says. "No, curve the fleur-de-lis." They bicker until the reddish cat jumps down and sits squarely on the drawing. "Problem solved," you say. They groan. The air grows warm from too many candles. You notice the window nailed shut with a sheet of parchment. Their insulation, perhaps, or their paranoia. Outside, a bell tolls midnight. Inside, time behaves differently. Hours melt like wax, stretched thin across repetition. A bearded man enters, cloak heavy with rain. Everyone falls silent. He lays a rolled map on the table. "From Venice," he says quietly, "stolen from the archives." The room leans forward as he unrolls it, a shimmering coastline, drawn with almost tender arrogance. "Beautiful," someone whispers. "Expensive," says another. He nods. Both. They'll re-engrave it by morning, invert a few islands, and by week's end half of Europe will own their version. The map will be the same melody in a new key, proof that art and theft are sometimes synonyms. Historians still argue whether these copyists were villains or unsung craftsmen preserving geography through piracy. Without them, many original maps, lost to fire or flood, might never have survived. The reddish cat sneezes, unimpressed by moral ambiguity. As dawn glows through the cracks, the workshop shifts tone. Someone hums softly. Another pours weak coffee. The forger who scolded you earlier now smiles tiredly. "You learn to love it," he says. "Every curve, every stolen line, it's like falling for someone who lies well." He gestures to the walls covered in maps, each subtly different. "You see, no one really owns the world. We just take turns pretending." You leave the attic and step into a narrow alley reeking of rain and ink. The reddish pat follows, shaking droplets from its fur. Behind you, the press begins again. Thump, hiss, sigh. The heartbeat of 1,000 uncredited geniuses. A thin figure waits at the corner, cloaked in gray. You recognize her as the woman from the mirrored map. She hands you a folded parchment. "For you," she whispers, "a reminder." You unfold it carefully. It's blank. Only a single word in the corner. Trace. You look up, but she's gone. As you walk, the city slowly wakes. The smell of bread mingles with smoke, the sky turning bruised pink. You think of how every coastline drawn, every island imagined is both theft and tribute. The reddish cat stops, watching a puddle tremble with reflected rooftops. In the warped water, the world appears upside down again, and you realize that maybe all maps are reflections, always reversed, always incomplete. A breeze tugs at the blank parchment in your hand. You could draw anything there, a continent, a constellation, or nothing. For a moment you understand the fever that drove these forgers, not greed, but the aching need to hold the infinite still. The reddish cat meows softly, as if reminding you the infinite doesn't feed anyone. You tuck the paper into your coat and keep walking. The bells ring again, distant and patient, and somewhere behind you another map is born, not from truth, but from persistence. And isn't that what the Renaissance was all along? A quiet war between those who discover and those who redraw.
You step into a sunlit room where the smell of old paper has ripened into something close to nostalgia. The reddish cat pads quietly beside you, fur dusted with flakes of dried glue from some forgotten print shop. It's the late 16th century now, shading into the 17th, and the air feels different, lighter, almost smug. The world has finally been measured, cataloged, and bound between covers. Humanity's biggest gamble, pretending the planet fits on pages, has paid off. Before you, lies an atlas. Its title glints in gold, Tantrum Orbis Terrarium, the theater of the world. But this isn't the first edition you saw in Antwerp. This one is bigger, bolder, edited, pirated, expanded, an atlas of atlases. You touch the leather binding. It's warm from the sun and faintly greasy from centuries of hands. The reddish cat sniffs it like an archaeologist. A man enters through a half-open door, coat dusted with chalk. He's another map maker, one of the countless disciples who followed Ortelius, Mercator, Hundus, and Belau. "You're just in time," he says, voice low and reverent. "We're printing the world today." He lifts a corner of the latest plate, so finely etched that the light seems to hum along its surface. "See here," he says, pointing. "We've updated the coast of Brazil, new soundings from Dutch sailors." He grins. "The Portuguese will hate it." Here's your mainstream historical fact. The Dutch Golden Age of the 17th century produced the most influential atlases in history, particularly those of the Belau family, whose monumental Atlas Mare spanned 11 volumes and more than 600 maps. They transformed geography into theater, each page a declaration of mastery, printed with the same confidence as royal decrees. You watch apprentices ink the plates, roll them through the press, and hang the sheets to dry. The room smells of turpentine and empire. Every few minutes someone shouts a correction. "Reduce the Sahara, too empty," or "Add more mountains to Japan." Geography as creative writing. Historians still argue whether these Dutch mapmakers were neutral scientists or agents of colonial propaganda. After all, each chart doubled as a claim, every harbor a footnote of ownership. When Amsterdam's presses boomed, so did its fleets. You drift between drying lines, the reddish cat weaving between your ankles. On one table, a young engraver etches sea monsters, still fashionable, though more decorative than terrifying now. "People expect them," he shrugs. "They'd complain if we left the oceans plain." The cat bats at a tiny dragon curling near the Azores. "That's our editor," you say. The boy laughs, though he looks around first. No one jokes too loudly in a room full of cartographers. Across the hall, two printers bicker over a new edition. "The English maps are catching up," one warns. "If we don't add something spectacular, they'll outsell us." "Spectacular," the other rolls his eyes. "What do you want me to do, draw the moon landing?" "Not yet," you whisper, smiling. There's a strange peace in this chaos. Every wall is lined with globes of varying sizes, some polished smooth, others patched with paper repairs. You trace one finger along the equator, feeling the bumps where continents meet. The reddish cat climbs onto a smaller globe and spins it lazily with one paw. For a second, the whole world wobbles on its axis. Here's your quirky tidbit. To ensure the ink wouldn't smudge, Belau's workshop sometimes used breadcrumbs to absorb excess oil. Apprentices would gently dab the fresh prints with bits of stale loaf, leaving faint crumbs of Europe scattered over Asia. The reddish cat naturally tries to eat one. "Careful," says the chalk-dusted man. "That's an expensive lunch." He hands you a finished page. "Look closely," he murmurs. "Every map is two things, what we know and what we hope." You tilt the sheet toward the light. Sure enough, the known world glows with certainty, but at the edges, beyond Patagonia, under the curling label Terra Australis Incognita, you see the dream flickering. Historians still argue whether that mythical southern continent was scientific hypothesis or cultural projection, a blank stage for Europe's imagination. Either way, it lasted in atlases long after explorers disproved it. Once an idea is printed, it resists extinction. The reddish cat yawns as the man continues. "They'll say we've conquered the unknown," he says softly.
but it's the unknown that conquers us. We can't stop chasing it. Outside, Amsterdam hums with prosperity, ships unloading spices, diamonds, and gossip. You and the cat step onto a narrow balcony overlooking the canal. Below, merchants argue prices, while gulls scream like prophets. In a window across the street, you glimpse a rival publisher assembling his own atlas, his apprentices glaring up as if caught spying. Rivalry here isn't secret, it's civic tradition. A gust of wind catches one of the drying pages and sends it spiraling into the water. The reddish cat watches it float away, the ink bleeding slowly into the canal until Europe itself dissolves. For a moment, you feel the strange sadness of completion, the world finally drawn, its mysteries flattened. Do you ever wonder, you ask aloud, if maps killed wonder? The man beside you smiles faintly. No, he says, they just changed its address. Back inside the press's thunder, another edition begins. The apprentices stack sheets into neat piles, each one an echo of the last, each promising to be the truest version yet. You realize that every age redraws the world to suit its reflection, and this age, the Dutch age, likes mirrors clean and bright. As twilight creeps across the workshop, you notice Ortelius's ghostly influence lingering in the margins, Mercator's projections stretched across new oceans, and even Guillaume's French flourishes sneaking into the corners. The whole Renaissance rivalry has folded itself into these pages, a chorus of ambition harmonizing across nations. The reddish cat curls beneath the table, half asleep, tail twitching in time with the press rhythm. You imagine it dreaming of coastlines that move, of islands that vanish and reappear. Maybe that's the truest map of all, the one no one can print. You lift one final atlas from the drying rack and flip through its pages. Mountains rise and shrink, borders breathe, the world expands and contracts like a living thing. You understand now that these mapmakers weren't competing to define the Earth. They were racing to feel it first. As the last light fades through the window, the ink glows faintly, as if alive. You close the book gently. The presses fall silent one by one, and somewhere in the quiet, you can almost hear the planet's sigh of relief at being noticed. The reddish cat opens one eye, stares at you for a moment, then goes back to sleep.
You wake to the hum of electricity, though you can't quite tell when the candlelight turned to LED. The reddish cat stretches beside you, tail flicking like an old metronome. You're still surrounded by maps, but now they glow. Screens, projections, soft blue outlines swimming across glass. The Renaissance has bled into the digital, and somehow, the rivalry never ended. It only changed fonts. You blink, and the room reshapes into a sleek modern lab. The smell of parchment is gone, replaced with ozone and coffee that tastes of deadlines. A massive monitor displays Earth, spinning in photorealistic clarity. Clouds slide over continents in real time. You zoom in, and there's your street, your neighbor's garden, your cat. Well, a cat, sitting on a rooftop. The precision feels divine, and a little creepy. A voice echoes from the corner, the ghost of a cartographer reincarnated as an engineer. "We map because we can't stand not knowing," he says, without looking up from his keyboard. His fingers glide like compass needles, coding the edges of the world. Same as Ortelius, same as Belao, only now the ink uploads itself. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The modern age of cartography owes much to satellites launched during the Cold War, initially tools of espionage that evolved into open networks powering GPS and online maps today. What began as state secrets became universal conveniences. A Renaissance mapmaker would have called it heresy. The reddish cat hops onto the desk, blocking part of the digital equator. The engineer laughs. "Hey, feline interference detected. Latitude unknown." The cat glares, unamused, as if asserting dominion over this glowing sphere of data. Historians still argue whether our obsession with perfect mapping is progress or paranoia. Some say it's freedom, knowledge made infinite. Others say it's surveillance, knowledge made heavy. And somewhere, perhaps the spirit of Gerardus Mercator smirks at the irony. His projection still stretches every map, distorting continents like old lies nobody wants to correct. The engineer gestures to a holographic globe hovering above the desk. He says, "Every pixel here is a descendant of ink lines and trembling hands. You see it now, the through line from Renaissance ambition to modern precision, the same hunger for control, the same fragile beauty." The reddish cat presses a paw against the hologram. The world wobbles slightly, rippling like the surface of a pond. "There you go again, messing up the projection." The cat purrs, the universal sound of contented rebellion. Here's your quirky tidbit. One of the first Google Maps Easter eggs was a hidden "Drag the Pegman to Atlantis" feature, an inside joke that briefly revealed a submerged city before vanishing with an update. Even the algorithms crave myth sometimes. You sit back and realize that the gentle rivalry of Renaissance mapmakers never stopped. It just moved online. Now the competition plays out between corporations and satellites, between open-source idealists and tech empires racing to chart not just the Earth, but every building, every heartbeat, every whisper of movement. The ghost of Bilal would be proud and horrified. You lean closer to the glowing globe and whisper, "What happens when there's nothing left to map?" The engineer doesn't answer. The reddish cat, however, yawns like a philosopher and curls against the warmth of the monitor. Outside, a delivery drone hums by, its blinking lights tracing a new constellation in the night. The rivalry has grown quieter, subtler, but it's still there. In every algorithm that decides which street to show first, in every blurred military base, in every disputed border softened by digital diplomacy, you can almost hear the old arguments echoing. Who owns this coastline? Which name goes where? Whose truth fits the frame? You zoom in again, past your city, past your street, past your window, until you see yourself reflected faintly in the glass. The map has looped back, turning observer into subject. You realize you've become part of the cartography, a dot among billions, pinned on some distant server. Historians still argue whether maps tell stories or erase them. You suspect both. Maybe that's the point. The reddish cat lifts its head, eyes half closed, and watches the spinning planet slow to a stop. The light on its fur flickers like the old candle you left burning in Section 1, the one you never really blew out. The centuries fold over each other, paper to parchment, ink to code, quill to cursor. You remember how this all began. A handful of men tracing coastlines they'd never seen, drawing monsters to fill the silence. Now the monsters have changed. Data leaks, disinformation, the fear of being too known. But the urge behind it all, still the same. To map is to imagine. To imagine is to compete. And to compete, gently or otherwise, is to feel alive. The reddish cat nudges your hand, as if demanding one final journey. So you zoom out, further, further, until the continents blend into swirling blues and greens. The Earth becomes a single shimmering sphere. No borders, no labels, just light. For the first time all night, it looks peaceful. You close your eyes and let the glow fade. The rivalry dissolves into the quiet hum of the room, into the faint thump of your heartbeat sinking with the world's slow spin. The reddish cat sighs, the kind of sigh that sounds like centuries exhaling. And as you sit there, you realize that every map, Renaissance or digital, is just a love letter to curiosity, a reminder that we keep redrawing the world because we're never done discovering ourselves. The hum of the screens dims to a whisper. The room softens around you, colors fading into the hush of late night. The reddish cat shifts, pressing against your leg for warmth. You rest your hand on its fur. It feels like the edges of a well-worn page, soft and sure. Your breathing slows. The earth on the monitor drifts into stillness, the glow now a pale halo on the walls. The rivalry, the noise, the centuries of ink and ambition, all of it ebbs away, leaving only calm. You can almost hear the faint rustle of parchment from another time, the whisper of a quill hovering over the unknown. You imagine the old mapmakers, their lanterns flickering, their hands steady despite exhaustion. You imagine the press creaking, the ink drying, the first reader opening a map and feeling, just for a second, that impossible rush of wonder. It's the same feeling you carry now, quiet and endless. You lean back, the cat's purr deepens. The world outside feels smaller, gentler, as if it finally understands it doesn't need to be measured tonight. Your eyelids grow heavy. The light fades completely. Somewhere between sleep and memory, you hear a voice, a soft, amused whisper from centuries past. The map is never done. And then, nothing but peace.